Howdy everybody, this is Omar, your Audio Amigo, back with another Audio Amigo review for you guys. The Rose Technics QuietSea was my first exposure to the Rose Technics brand, and seeing as it's been quite a while, Rose Technics decided to give it a bit of an update. This is the logically named QuietSea 2, the follow-up to the original QuietSea priced at $70 US, an increase from the 50 MSRP of the original. With a new waifu but similar overall looks, does the QuietSea 2 improve on the original, or does this take a completely different approach to sound? Well, let's find out. First, however, my usual disclaimer, Rose Technics sent me this set for review. I'm not being paid for this review, but because I could turn around and sell this set if I wanted to, I've gone ahead and activated the paid promotion feature here on YouTube. I do these disclaimers because I believe in full transparency when there's potential bias besides my own personal taste at play. Thank you to Rose Technics for shipping me this, and thank you to all of you for your continued support. In some ways, the unboxing experience and accessories on the QuietSea 2 here is an upgrade over the QuietSea 1, and in other ways, it's a downgrade. Upgrades include the cable, which is now modular, featuring a 4.4mm screw-on adapter, more on that later. You also get a cleaning cloth, which is branded, as well as a cleaning tool, which I always really like to see. You also get a better selection of ear tips. Not only do you get the wide bore sort of Rose Technics standard ear tips, but you also get a set of their, in my opinion, pretty fantastic sound cocoon ear tips, which I honestly really like to see. You also get stickers for Rosie, who's the new waifu, along with a acrylic stand of Rosie. There she is in all her glory. You can consider this an upgrade or a downgrade based on your personal preferences, but what is 100% a downgrade is this leather pouch that they include as a sort of carry case solution. The original QuietSea came with a branded hard case, so personally speaking, this is honestly just a less attractive, less classy solution. For $20 more here on the QuietSea 2, I can sort of see where the money has gone. They went to the modular cable, the sound cocoon ear tips, which are $14 on their own and are pretty premium. Personally speaking, I personally would trade in the acrylic stand, the stickers, and the cleaning tools for the hard case on the original. It just would have been a nicer overall package, and as much as I like the cutie here, I would have preferred a case. Let's take a look at the cable. Put you over here. In many ways, the cable is an upgrade from the original QuietSea 2. It's still cloth. It's a similar sort of cloth braided cable that they've got going on here, but it is slimmer overall. It's just smaller, which makes it easier to handle. It just behaves better. It's lighter. It feels less cumbersome compared to the original. It's also modular. You saw the 4.4mm connector in the back there. Unfortunately, my main complaint for the old cable, being the microphonics, is definitely still present. It is improved, but it is still there, especially if you're listening to quieter music or if you have a beard or you wear collared shirts like I do. On the plus side, the modular connector here is screw secured, which is my preferred way of doing modular connections. Unfortunately, it is not captive, meaning it will slide all the way down the cable if you let it. And another complaint, which really bothers me, but that might be minor for you guys, is that the indexing marks here don't really line up. They're sort of off-center a little bit, and even when you have the nut screwed in here, it doesn't line up, which just bothers me a little bit. You can see the branding is on the nut there. It also serves as a form of grip for pulling this out of stubborn amps or heavier players. Another complaint, my cable came from the factory with a bit of a pull in it. You can see there. QC must have missed that one, or it's a bit of a problem. It does not affect the sound, I have found. I did measure this with my multimeter, so there's no electrical issue with the sleeving here, but it's not a pleasant thing to have and doesn't feel as nice in the hands as the rest of the cable. The Y-split is nice and slim with nice Rosalsa branding on there, and I like how the chin slider not only works well against the cables there, stays in place, but it also sort of slots in nicely, whoop, there kind of stealthily against the chin slider there. The ear hooks here do not have any sort of creakiness or crinkle to them when you move them like that. The 2-pin connectors match rest the hardware and are at least marked with R and L, which makes it a little bit easier to identify, a little bit plain Jane. The stereo indicators are a little bit hard to see. Overall, The cable does feel premium in the hands. I'm happier that it's less bulky than the original QuietSea. It's just a shame that the microphonics and the QC issues with the connectors and the cable itself are holding it back from me being super happy with it. I personally would have preferred just a standard cable with modular connectors. It would have still felt nice in the hands, but not been as microphonic, and would have avoided some of the problems of the cloth braiding here. While the cable and overall packaging is very different from the QuietSea, the build and design on the QuietSea 2 is honestly nearly identical to the original. These are the same dual material shells. You can see the mostly metal lower shell there with the acrylic on the top half and the metal top plate there. You have the same metal nozzle, but that's one of the big differences here. The original had the sort of ovaloid nozzles inspired by the Eco IEMs. This is standard, round. Ventilation is similar to the original. You have the one vent there, and then the sort of slot vent there on the faceplate. What that meant is, for me, no driver flex, no pressure buildup issues at all. Other features that are interesting, you can see this screw that's sort of holding the sandwich of materials together, which was not present on the original. And yeah, overall, the build is identical to the original. You have the same sort of nozzle filter, just a different shape, same dual materials. It does come in different colors, which is interesting to see. But overall, it feels very solid. So long as the screw and the glue holding everything together hold, I can see these surviving some good drops and scrapes thanks to these metal shells. And overall, while they're very light, they do feel pretty solid in the hands. Time to pull up the specifications. Inside the QuietSea 2 is a 10mm dynamic driver with a carbon copper alloy dome. Being a single dynamic driver, drivability is super easy. This will run out of essentially anything with a headphone jack, as I keep saying. Moreover, the QuietSea 2 does not change sound when exposed to impedance adapters or higher output impedance sources, so no worries if you have an older source and you're going to pick these up. The nozzles, as I mentioned, are no longer oval. They are now round, and they measure 6mm in diameter at their widest point. The shells overall are just under 5 grams a side in terms of weight, and the whole package comes in at under 30 grams total, including the cable. I like simple single DD sets like this at this price range. There's no real surprises on the spec sheet, no considerations when picking a source, especially on the budget side of things. It's just nice to see. Now, however, it's time for the cool wall. The original QuietSea ended up landing in bland due to the simple eco-inspired design and the basic opaque plastic. And honestly, the QuietSea 2 here continues the similar thing, especially here in the silver and sort of gray color here. There is a more dynamic looking blue metal color, which I'll pull up here. I really like that dark blue metal. I think that the darker color works better with the clear plastic window here. I think that while the dark color is improved from the original QuietSea, it's not enough of an improvement for me to want to put these in cool. As a result, these are going to remain in bland. I just don't think that there's overall too much to look at here. The shape would be interesting if it wasn't already done on the QuietSea 1. So yeah, these are going to stay in bland, but they're not horrible looking, I'll say. Time now to check in with the discerning tastes of the Council of Ladies and see what they think of the QuietSea 2, starting off with their color preference. It's a 3-2 score in favor of blue, which honestly I can agree with. I just prefer the color over the more boring silver. As far as these being pretty, we have a solid showing of 3-1-1, a general positive leaning opinion. As far as these starting conversations or earning compliments, the ladies stayed inside their party lines, meaning a 3-2 score here. Looking at their thoughts, it seems that the clear plastic is a point of contention here. Some people thinking that it looks cheap, other people kind of liking the see-through look. Overall, the opinions seem to be pretty positive. There is some love for the dual material nature here, as well as the colors of the metal. But overall, I tend to agree with the ladies here. It's better than the original, but not better enough to make it break into the cool section. The original QuietSea did very, very well in terms of comfort. The oval nozzles combined with the shape of the shells that was inspired by Ico was a great combo, and overall it worked very well. Like with the original, I personally have no comfort issues at all with the QuietSea 2. I can wear them for long periods of time with no issues at all. There are no hot spots here on the inside since there's no comfort wing or no bulges. There's no pressure buildup, no problems at all. Long sessions, easy to do with these. My wife rated the original QuietSea like a glove. However, the QuietSea 2 here has been downgraded to a technical pass, mostly due to the round nozzles here that have replaced the oval ones. She says that due to the round nozzles versus the oval, they're just less comfortable in her ears than the originals. And while she still could wear them for longer sessions, she couldn't wear them as long as the original QuietSeas, hence the downgrade in comfort here. However, these still did pass, so overall I'll say not a bad showing here for the QuietSea 2. But now let's go ahead and get into the sound on the QuietSea 2 and see if it has changed compared to its predecessor. Bass on the QuietSea 2 is not quiet at all. If it was an ocean, it would be an angry and stormy sea for sure. There is a significant bass boost happening here with very rumbly sub bass and punchy, energetic mid bass notes. The choruses of Anita came through excellently here on the QuietSea. Very quick attack, some decent texture being thrown off by that dynamic driver. The decay was a little bit soft with some of the lower frequency notes, but overall this was a very fun bass presentation. The kick drums and bass guitar are also emphasized in the presentation here. The buzzy, distorted bass notes in Under the Bridge, for example, are very energetic with great tonality and energy. The buzziness in the ears is very satisfying, and it lends a great warmth and overall impact to the replay. The bass, I will say, is right on the edge of what I would call a full-on bass head presentation. It's not quite there, but it's definitely closer to bass head than I would say generally a warm set. For the price, I think that the overall texture and tonality of the bass is a lot of fun, and I think it's really well done. You do, however, have to pay for that big boosted bass. Maybe not as much as I was expecting. The lower mids here are definitely thickened up by that bass. It's not a full-on muddy, soupy, swampy tonality, but I will say that it's just beyond my personal preference for lower mids warmth. A tad bit too tonally affected for my tastes. Burning for You, for example, the bass guitar and the kick drum come through amazingly, but I do feel like the synthesizers have lost a little bit of their edge here. The guitars are fine, the distortion is not as aggressive as I would like it to be, but the vocals and the overall tonality I think is fine. The vocals in particular do benefit from a little bit of that warmth. The whole track just feels a little bit slower and thicker than I typically prefer, but it's not to the point where I think it's straight up bad in terms of the replay. Female vocals are also affected, but again, not to the point where I think that the replay gets ruined. Otto, for example, still sounds just as excitable and intense as usual, but I feel like there's a little bit of bite and dynamism that's missing from her vocals in Odo in particular. I do feel like the bass is fighting her vocals a little bit. It's not an absolute deal breaker. This track still sounded pretty nice. It was nice to listen to. Her vocal performance and style are still intact. She's still a superstar. It just wasn't as nice as I typically would prefer. Ultimately, the mids here are tonally affected on both ends. They're not totally ruined by that big bass, but you do feel the impact throughout the mid-range. The upper mids and treble are honestly pretty smooth. I was expecting the sort of borderline fatiguing boost along the lines of the original QuietSea, but instead, I was pleasantly surprised. Female vocal harmonics are controlled but not muffled or pushed back. Cyndi Lauper in Time After Time, for example, the harmonics that she throws off with her higher, more intense notes still have some bite and some sizzle to them, but they never approach sibilant or sharp or painful. They never had me reaching for the volume knob. No song really did have me reaching for the volume knob. Same goes for the treble presentation. Those very present cymbals and hi-hats in Dreams have really nice sparkle and wash to them. The decay is a little fast for my taste. There isn't really any fatiguing, bitey, or sharp tonality to them, which can be very common for this track and a more excitable set. The cymbals aren't the airiest, and they can sound a little bit sort of flat in terms of the way the wash is presented here, but it's enough so that the overall tonality here doesn't lean completely dark. There's enough sparkle here so that there's some light in this set. Not so much that it pushes the QuietSea into full V-shaped territory, but enough to help it not, again, sound too dark. Technical performance on the QuietSea is weighted more towards the bottom end. The low-end details and events are rendered very well by this little driver. The live Storyteller's version of Folsom Prison Blues has the low-end rumbling subtones of Cash's voice, all the harmonics that he's throwing off, in addition to the sounds of the guitars resonating off of the walls and interacting with each other in this hall. All of that, I feel, is recreated pretty well by the QuietSea 2 here. That also goes for Waltz for Debbie, where the background conversation ends up a little bit more forward than usual. The glassware and barware hits, however, don't fare as well. Most of the main ones that I listen to are there, but for some of the other ones, I felt like I needed a little bit more volume than usual to hear them in the mix. Compared to other single dynamic driver sets, I would say that in terms of technicalities, this is somewhere between the EW200 and the Keyfine Delchi, not quite as resolving as the Delchi, but a bit above the EW200. Stereo separation and perceived 3D soundstage are well done here. The shifting cymbal effect in Stranglehold feels nice and wide as it moves from sort of beyond your left ear to beyond your right ear. There's no visible transition from far left to center to far right, which is good. It's very smooth. I had no impression of things sounding closed in or claustrophobic, which is also nice. It earns good marks in terms of stereo separation and perceived 3D soundstage. Kenny Dorham's version of I Had the Craziest Dream. Very solid imaging on this track. You've got the piano, the bass, the guitars, the drums. They're all coming from sort of separate areas in the stage. The track does have some front to back sensation going on here with the piano and the trumpet specifically. Overall, I would say while the QuietSea 2 might be average for IEMs in terms of perceived 3D soundstage and stereo separation, that's not a bad thing. I think it does pretty decent considering the price that it's at. In terms of overall tuning, the straightforward, warm nature here on the QuietSea 2 is a stark departure from the brighter leaning signatures that I typically expect from Rose Technics. This makes it a bit of an outlier in the Rose Technics family, at least of the ones that I've reviewed so far, but it certainly isn't a new or unique tuning at this price point. For the comparisons, I've brought in the original QuietSea, as well as what I feel are some of the other warmer tuned sets in this price bracket on the market. We'll start with the original QuietSea, still available at an MSRP of $50 US. As I said earlier, this is much brighter overall. It was shoutier, it's a bit more prone to sibilance, it has sort of an uneven treble presentation to my ears. By contrast, the QuietSea 2 is sort of the opposite. It's a warmer, bassier, less vocal forward, less sparkly, much more relaxing listen. It's a very different presentation of sound with a completely different coloration. And I think it makes sense that Rose Technics are going to continue to produce the original QuietSea, at least for now, because these two sets have radically different target audiences and they present sound in a very different way from one another. I do prefer the cable on the new version. It just feels more premium. It's less microphonic. I do actually prefer the construction and shell design on the old ones. They just feel a little bit weightier and the metal feels a bit heavier. That might not be great for comfort, but it does feel a bit more premium in the shells, and I do love the oval nozzles here. So if you want a bright leaning set, go for the OG QuietSea. If you want something warmer, more relaxing, a bit more palatable, especially if you're treble sensitive, grab the QuietSea 2. Next up is the Draco, priced at $60 US. This is a dual DD set as opposed to a single, but it's tuned in a very warm, relaxing, old school way that is sort of similar-ish to the QuietSea 2. The Draco, to me, is a bit more neutral sounding than the QuietSea 2. It's not as intense in the bass, and it's not as bright in the upper mids and treble. The Draco, however, is more forward and more natural with female vocals. They're just more present sounding, more natural sounding compared to the QuietSea 2. The Draco and its smoother treble ends up coming across less V-shaped to me than the QuietSea 2. And if you're super sensitive to treble or you find too much bass, to be fatiguing as well, the Draco will be the safer choice here. But overall, the QuietSea 2 is the more contrasty, more excitable sounding set, at least compared to the Draco. But now comes the set that I think actually sounds the closest overall to the QuietSea 2. That being the Simgot EW300, particularly with these gold nozzles here. These two are super close to each other in terms of overall coloration and sort of flavor of sound. There are differences, however. In my comparison, the EW300 came across as a little bit rumblier and a little bit more textured with very low frequency drops, while the QuietSea 2 was the punchier, richer, more exciting, like mid-bassy sounding set. That extra richness does mean that it comes off sounding overall thicker and soupier in the lower mids compared to the EW300. And the EW300 definitely sounds like it has the more articulate, more forward, more balanced mid-range presentation, at least to my ears. It is also the more technical sounding set, but that's due to the planar and PZT here in the EW300. It's more energetic in the upper treble as a result of those extra drivers. Some people really don't like the tonality that those planar and PZT drivers provide. Personally, I don't mind it very much. If you're one of those people, the QuietSea 2 I feel can be a legitimate alternative to the gold nozzle tuning on the EW300, as long as you're okay giving up some resolution and separation in the mids. If, on the other hand, you want more variety in your sound, you maybe see yourself swapping to that silver nozzle tuning every once in a while, I still think the EW300 is a fantastic value with that versatility. Lastly, though, let's bring in the discontinued Tangzu Fudu Verse 1, priced once upon a time for 90 US dollars. But basically, this is not on sale anymore. I just brought it in because it reminded me of sort of what the QuietSea sounds like. The Fudu one is similar to the Draco by comparison to the QuietSea 2. It's more neutral and more vocal forward than the QuietSea 2, which is sort of similar to the Draco. Unlike the Draco, however, this has a pair of BAs rather than a second DD, and what that means is the upper treble here is more boosted and more in line with what the QuietSea offers, with a bit of that extra shimmer and sparkle at the top end of some instrument harmonics. That makes this come across as more of a warm, neutral sounding IEM to me compared to the straight up warm sound on the QuietSea 2. If you were interested in the Fudu 1 and you've heard sort of like I have that the Fudu 2 is more different to the Fudu 1 than similar, and you feel a bit sad that you maybe missed out on this tonality, I think that the QuietSea 2 can be a decent alternative to the Fudu, so long as you're okay with a more recessed female vocal presentation and a warmer, bassier sound sort of overall. Wrapping things up then, the original QuietSea is the outlier in this group. This is much brighter overall, with upper mids and treble that can be a little overpowering for some folks. The EW300 and the QuietSea 2, these two are very similar in terms of overall tonality, with the EW300 coming across as the more refined, more technical, more versatile set, thanks to that second nozzle, while the QuietSea 2 is a bit punchier in the mid bass and a bit warmer as a result. Then you have the Draco and the Fudu. Both of these are more warm neutral than straight up warm. Vocals on these two will be more forward and spotlit compared to the rest of the sets on this table. The Draco will be darker overall with more of an old school tonality with like rolled off treble, whereas the Fudu carries more energy in that upper treble and has that little bit of extra airiness to the sound. Honestly, I think that the QuietSea did well to change up the tuning here. I think that it is now a much easier to recommend set to more people than it was in its original form. But before I go any further, let's go ahead and pull up the Audio Amigo Arbitrary rating scale and figure out what we're going to do with the QuietSea 2 here. As I just said, I think that the QuietSea 2 can be considered an improvement on its predecessor in terms of palatability of overall sound for a mass market. While the original worked as a sort of bright, low-volume set, this is much more of an all-rounder with its warmer-leaning signature. The cable is now modular, and it now comes with a set of premium ear tips. The comfort, while not as good as the original, is still good. The leather pouch is honestly a big bummer, especially considering that the case on the original was pretty nice, if a little generic. The cable is another bummer. While the cloth braiding, in my opinion, is nicer, it is still microphonic, and the QC on the connectors and the cloth braiding itself just really bothers me. Sound overall is pretty good. I like it a lot. I just wish it had a little more of a special something in some areas to distinguish itself from the competition. This is bassier and warmer, but it's in the way that makes it seem a bit more sluggish in the mids compared to some other sets at this price point. This is not a bad IEM. I think it competes well at this price range, but I don't think it's as much of a standout as some of the other sets that it's competing with. For that reason, I will be putting the QuietSea 2 in the but I like this tier. I think that it is a solid, warm-leaning set with good sound. I just wish they would have taken the acrylic stand and the stickers away and given us a hard case instead, maybe drop the price just a little bit as well as change the cable. I think that would have gone a long way to making it more overall competitive in this price range. Alrighty then, who do I think should be buying the QuietSea 2? Well, interestingly, it's not fans of the original QuietSea. Well, at least not if they're expecting the same bright-leaning sort of tuning. This IEM is not for treble heads. It's not for people who want a clean, neutral sound, because this is not any of those things. Who this is for, though, is people who honestly liked the gold nozzle tuning on the EW300, but for some reason couldn't stand the treble here. You know, they were maybe sensitive to the PZT or the annular planar in this. I also think that this is a solid choice for people who tried out things like the Rock Lobster or the Unicron. This is generally darker and warmer than either of those two IEMs. So if you want an even bassier, even warmer single DD set, this could be what you're looking for. Finally, if you want something heavier in bass but don't want to go full bass head, I think this can make a like baby bass headset, like a borderline bass headset. You can enjoy your bass here and not feel as many of the tonal consequences of like a full fat bass headset. This still has tonal consequences, but it's like the 2% milk version of those consequences. Overall, I think the QuietSea 2 is a pretty solid set. Even if it's not the most competitive thing in its price range, I think it will have its fans. That's going to do it for the QuietSea 2. As much as I said I would have gotten rid of the acrylic stand, I have to admit it's been nice just having it around, just in terms of some eye candy. Probably will never use the stickers just because I'm the kind of person that would rather put them in an album rather than put them somewhere and have them flake off and get destroyed. But that's just me. Coming up next, it's the return of the Planar project and my review of the highly anticipated Letshuoer S12 Ultra. Can Letshuoer come back to a market that they used to do so well in and fight back some of this new competition that has been appearing lately? We'll find that out next time, so keep an eye out for that one. But for now, as usual, thank you all so very much for watching. Huge shout out to my Compadres Club members. Remember, $5 a month, and you get to decide what I review with your money, and you help make the channel more independent, less reliant on review samples, review tours, review loaners, and so on. I really appreciate that. Thank you. I hope you have a great rest of your day. This has been Omar with Audio Amigo Reviews, and I will catch y'all next time.